So getting straight into it, what are the WEPs? So the Women's Empowerment Principles WEPs were launched over a decade ago by the UN Global Compact and UN Women to provide guidance to business on how to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community. They're grounded in the recognition that businesses have a stake in and a responsibility for gender equality and women's empowerment and inclusion. More practically, they're a set of 7 principles that encourage companies to look across their business, understand their responsibilities, and seize the opportunities for positive impact. The WEPs are more of a holistic framework. They're meant to act as a roadmap in a company's journey towards gender equality, and they cover topics like women in leadership, flexible work, child-dependent care, equal pay for work of equal value, gender-responsive supply chain practices, and zero tolerance against sexual harassment in the workplace. When the WEPs were established, there were only 39 signatories. Today, we're happy to celebrate over 10,000 leaders having signed the CEO statement of support for the WEPs and counting. This clearly shows that companies everywhere now acknowledge the value of actively supporting women throughout business operations, and that business really does have a fundamental role to play to advance gender equality and social sustainability. As mentioned, the principles are holistic and are meant to be enacted all together, in no particular order or prioritization. More information on all the 7 principles, including suggested actions and resources, can be found on the WEPs website, weps.org. Now we can dive into each of the 7 principles themselves. The first principle is on establishing high-level corporate leadership for gender equality. Corporate leadership is an integral part of making gender equality and women's empowerment a top strategic priority. It publicly signals the CEOs and the executive teams goals and targets for implementing the WEPs and how the 7 principles will become part of this corporate sustainability strategy, day-to-day operations, and the organizational culture itself. Setting the tone from the top is critical to driving action throughout the organization, and by signing the CEO statement of support to the WEPs, business leaders send an important message to employees, customers, investors, business partners, and other important stakeholders that advancing gender equality is a company priority with the top-level support. They also communicate that gender equality is not just a women's issue. Rather, it's a smart business strategy that will strengthen the organization and benefit everyone. Principle 2 of the WEPs is to treat all women and men fairly at work without discrimination. This is not only a moral necessity, but it's also good for business. Having equal treatment between women and men in the workplace translates to better talent acquisition, higher employee retention and satisfaction, increased productivity, and ultimately better decision-making. And now this is even more important given the pandemic's disproportionate impact on women. We've already seen that the economic gender gap is growing. It will now take 150 years or approximately 5 generations to close the economic gender gap. But we've also seen with COVID, the fair treatment extends beyond equal pay and includes a variety of other aspects related to work, including flexible working arrangements, inclusive workplace culture, and gender-sensitive recruitment and retention policies, amongst many other things. Principle 3 of the WEPs focuses on employee health, well-being, and safety, physical, emotional, and mental well-being included. Of course, it's important to make sure there is no sexual harassment or violence in a company, as this can not only be devastating to employees' overall well-being, but can also result in high costs to women in terms of lost earnings, missed promotions, and less productivity and courage at work. Policies in line with Principle 3 include safety measures against potential physical risks, such as harmful chemicals or materials, as well as preventing all forms of violence and sexual harassment at work, and ensuring all employees equal access to health insurance. The next principle is Principle 4, and this covers education and training for career advancement. It's important that companies have trainings for all employees, not just human resources or the sustainability department, about how the company is advancing gender equality to better align everyone around shared values and help ensure compliance with company policies and practices. It's also important to have networking and mentoring programs for women employees, especially in traditionally male-dominated fields. And actually, we have a platform for WEP signatories called WEPs Learn, and this includes personal development modules that can be used by women to advance their professional skills. But my colleague Anna can speak more to this and other resources about the specific principles shortly. Principle 5 moves the focus from the workplace to the marketplace, focusing on enterprise development, supply chain, and marketing practices. This principle is really supposed to focus on the company's reach beyond its own office and its own employees by focusing on its interaction with customers, suppliers, and other businesses. So, for example, suggested actions within Principle 5 include removing harmful gender-based stereotypes in all media and advertising, implementing gender-responsive procurement practices, helping women overcome barriers in accessing financial services, and more. Principle 6 then moves us to the community focus of the principles themselves by empowering women through community initiatives and advocacy. It's really important to realize that a business's reach extends beyond just its business practices. Employees are living in a community, and company policies and practices affect employees as well as their families outside of the workplace and extending beyond business practices. So this principle encourages companies to advance gender equality by leading by example among businesses, working with community stakeholders and officials, and using philanthropy and grants programs to support community initiatives. Finally, the last principle is Principle 7, which focuses on measuring and reporting. A common theme we see in our work with companies on advancing gender equality is the commitment being in place, but lacking the actions needed to make impact on this commitment. Principle 7 encourages companies to measure progress on these commitments, and public reporting holds companies accountable in making this lasting progress. It also highlights the importance of collecting sex disaggregated data to provide a better understanding of how women are differently impacted across the workplace. I'll now pass the floor back to Anna for more on the WEPs journey, as well as the tools and resources available to WEPs signatories. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Margarita. So now you've heard about the 7 principles, and you may wonder, okay, what do we do now? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But first, starting to say that the WEPs journey is, in fact, a journey. It's not only about making the commitment, but to really kind of follow through in this journey. So I saw that somebody in the chat was asking about how do I get my executive team on board with this. The considering stage before you sign is very, very important. It's important to consult within the company to really understand the approach that you can take, but also what stakeholders need to be informing the strategy and the action plan going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to show to the executive team that today it's not even a question whether a company should be pursuing gender equality measures in the company. It is demanded by investors. It's demanded by business partners. They want to make sure that they are really aligning with the partners that have the same values as themselves to protect themselves from any risk in supply chains or in partnerships. And I will go through a little bit. We have on the WEPs Learn, we have a specific tool on how to make those consultations. To really hear from all of the stakeholders. So the considering stage is very important. It's not only about that signature of the CEO, but to make sure that the whole organization is part of this journey. And that happens to the most extent in a considering stage. Signing is when you sign and become a WEP signatory. And we really encourage this moment to be an visible moment with both internally and externally. That would really help you to foster accountability to the follow through if that commitment is well known by all the company stakeholders. Activate is when you start activating and working on your internal action plan and get all the teams involved and participating in the drafting of the action plan and the implementation. Engage is then when you are ready to engage with your external stakeholders. That might be your suppliers, that might be community members that you would like to join you on the WEPs journey. Sustain is very important, and all of these are not necessarily in this particular order. You may want to already start with engaging with your external stakeholders, but sustaining is about really making sure that you have the right KPIs and that you're tracking progress. It's only when you're tracking progress that you will be able to sustain your efforts. And then we encourage you again to be transparent about your journey and not only report on the WEPs website, but also put it in your annual sustainability reports. Can go to the next. So we have a few tools to help you on this journey. So we suggest that you start with the WEPs gender gap analysis tool. This is to help you establish the baseline, to know where you are and what are the measures that you already have in place. The tool also shows you where you have gaps and weaknesses and where action would be required. So we encourage you to use this tool. But also to use it together with the action plan module that we have on WEPs Learn that really makes sure that it's an inclusive process, that the action plan that you're putting together is informed by the views and aspirations of the entire team. We have, and I will go in and will show you a little bit about the toolkit that we have, but we have about 300 resources at your disposal on different themes. From equal pay to parental leave and other areas. And we also have a template that you can be using to get you started on how to draft this gender action plan. And with those tools, we really hope to see that you can advance on gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, marketplace, and community. So the gender gap analysis tool has 18 multiple choice questions to measure commitment, implementation, measurement, and transparency on topics related to those 3 pillars of the WEPs: workplace, marketplace, and community. And it gives you a score and an estimate of where you are on the journey from beginner, improver, achiever to leader. And we see most of the companies are falling as improvers, but there are also many beginners and some front runners that have made a lot of progress. It's important to set concrete goals and targets and to measure progress over time, as I mentioned earlier. So the WEPs Gender Action Plan module is a self-guided map on how you can develop a successful organization-wide gender action plan that advances gender equality and women's empowerment. And it's helping you to drive positive outcomes for both business and society. So you have to register and you get a certificate at the end of the module. So I mentioned earlier that we have an extensive toolkit. This toolkit has thematic guides on different thematic areas within gender equality. It also has a few different case studies from other companies that might inspire you on what you can do to overcome certain challenges. We have some leaders inside. It's very important to have leaders within your organization that drives this. It's not driving on its own, but we also have transparency and accountability framework that gives you a set of indicators and other various forms of resources, such as recordings of previous webinars and the WEPs Learn. There's also frequently asked questions and how-tos that can help you on this journey. So the action plan template is for you to get started. It is just to give you a starting point to create your own. And of course, it needs to be customized into what works for your company. You can base it, as I mentioned earlier, on the results that you got from the gap analysis tool, and then feed the weaknesses and prioritize the areas where you would like to focus on first. We can move to the next. So some of the tools that we think is useful, particularly for those that are struggling with an unbiased workforce, where you have a majority of male employees. This checklist is to help you to kind of tweak your recruitment approach, to go through from how are you developing vacancy announcements, to where are you posting it, how are you attracting a better pool of women candidates. So I encourage you to look into this checklist. It goes from drafting of the job description till the appointment of the candidates. So I encourage you to look into that. We also have other tools, such as I saw there was a question about the intersectionality of the women's empowerment principles. And while it's called the Women's Empowerment Principles, there is no one size fits all to this. You need to look really deeper into what categories of employees do you have. And women are not just women. Women come from different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, different abilities, and different educational backgrounds. So it's very important for you to take an intersectional approach to this. And we do have this resource, which is a manual. We also have webinar recordings for you to listen in on how other companies have gone about this, to not just looking at in a binary form, but also to look at it from a more holistic perspective and being inclusive of all genders and all categories of your stakeholders. So I encourage you, there is this deep dive into diversity, equity, equality and inclusion manual, but we also have other ones on racism, on other themes that might help you on the journey. The most recent assessment tool that we have is gender responsive procurement. As we heard from Margarita earlier, Principle 5 is focusing on the supply chain. And you do have a very important role to play in the supply chain, in the choice of goods and services that you are purchasing. This tool gives you an insight into how you can tweak some of your approaches, strategies, and policies within the company to understand how to fully implement a gender responsive procurement. We have taken a dual approach to this issue, looking at purchasing from women-owned business, but also from other WEP signatories and from gender responsive companies. It's very important to foster this ecosystem of companies that are all contributing to gender equality and women's empowerment. And the supply chain is a very good place to do that. And to look at how your suppliers, it minimizes your own risks in terms of not only looking at human rights abuses and other things, but also looking deeper into gender equality. And it helps, as I said, with reducing your risks, but also to help contribute to gender equality among your suppliers. So this particular assessment tool consists of 31 questions, and you can use it as a standalone tool to go deeper into Principle 5. As I mentioned already, we also have a transparency and accountability framework. It has a set of indicators to give you ideas on how you can track and measure to make sure that you're sustaining the progress on gender equality within your company. We have different types of indicators. The baseline indicators are the ones that you've been asked to report on when you join. Where are you when you join the WEPs network? There are 3 indicators focusing on the percentage of women among the workforce, among the management, and in the top leadership or on the board. And then we have essential indicators that elaborates further on those. And these are also the ones that we are asking you to report on an annual basis. In addition, to give you additional ideas, we have complementary input and support measures, indicators, and additional ones for your journey, since all your companies are on different levels on this journey, different levels of maturity, but also different types of industries that might require different type of indicators. So we have about 60 plus indicators for you to take advantage of. Finally, you may ask, okay, how do we join the Women's Empowerment Principles? There is a few steps. You go to weps.org/join. There is the CEO statement of support that the CEO or the highest level decision maker in the company needs to sign, and then you upload it to the form that you find on weps.org/join, and then you submit it. We would need about, depending on the period of the year, but we need about 2 weeks to review it before we can approve. And it's important that the date that you put with the CEO signature is the date that will go with your join date. So even though we take 2 weeks, we still count the date of the CEO signature as the date of joining. And we really encourage you in the CEO quote that we ask for in this form, that you really elaborate on how will your company contribute to gender equality. We know that you're joining because you're committed to it, but how will your contribution look like? And they would also require a CEO photo, no logos, but professional headshot, please. So with that, I hand it over to you, Margarita, and I hope if you have any questions, we'll take them later or in the Q&A function. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that.